done it, but will we ever see Muslim celebrations banned in parts of Britain? It's time for that to head. Well, it's kicked off a little bit in Spain after local authorities banned Muslim festivals like Eid from public facilities. Well, the Conservative-led local council over there says that events, quote, alien to our identity can't use civic spaces. Obviously, some people are calling it Islamophobic and discriminatory, etc. Muslim leaders say that they're being singled out, while opposition parties say it risks dividing communities. But the decision marks a first in Spain and a potential legal flashpoint as well. It got me thinking, do you think we'd ever see anything like that in Britain? Well, I'm joined now by the former chairman of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Mohammed Amin, and journalist and commentator Khadija Khan. Thank you very much. Khadija, I'll start with you. Well, do you think we could ever see anything like that in Britain? Would it be okay, do you think, if anyone tried to introduce that in Britain?
Thank you so much for having me. It's not about what I personally like or dislike. It's about the legitimate concerns. And when we have majority consensus, then such prohibition should be in place, especially when these rituals and these traditions, religious festivals are unnecessary and not required by our religion, and such prohibitions do not curtail religious freedoms. Given that what happened in Spain, Spanish Town, is not racist or Islamophobic, as the leader of the Conservative People's Party is that the mayor does not single anyone out for their beliefs. Yes, a fringe element of the far-right Folks Party praise it for banning Islamic celebration because they want to keep the Christian outlook of their town intact. This is something called theocratic attitude, which is prevalent in Muslim culture. This is why we see certain section of Muslim communities in the West flexing their muscles, occupying public places and using their gatherings as a show of strength, and the local people feel threatened by the growing influence of another religion. So why it is racism and Islamophobia when this happens in Spain and claimed by a far-right element, but all fine and fair when Muslim fundamentalists do it, and they do it with impunity? The bottom line should be keep religion out of political and social sphere. Be consistent when you are talking about hyper-manifestation of religiosity.
OK, Mohammed Amin, I'll bring you in now. I mean, would it really be that bad if we decided to do something like that in Britain? I do think there are quite a few Muslim countries where Christians wouldn't be allowed to go out on the streets or dominate public buildings and pray and celebrate.
Well, first of all, I'm not here to talk about other Muslim-majority countries. We can talk about some of them if you want later on, but I haven't prepared and not looked at them. What I'm interested in is our country, Britain. Now, we have an established church, which is the Church of England. The Church of England does not want other religions to be treated as second-class or downtrodden. It's perfectly normal for local authorities to rent out premises that they own to community groups, to religious groups, to hold all kinds of events and festivals. When the Pope came to Manchester, I think it was about 40 years ago, there was a massive open-air mass held in a public park, and everybody was fine with that. All that I require is that all religions are treated equally and fairly rather than discrimination against one religion, namely mine.
OK, so you would view this as being discrimination, because I'll come back to Khadija in a minute, but I think Khadija's view is that really it was a democratic decision made by whoever's in charge in that particular town at that time, having been elected by the people of that area. So should the desires of the Islamic community in that area trump democracy?
I've read the story in The Guardian about that town in Spain, and what that town has decided to do is to treat one religion, namely Islam, worse than another religion, Christianity. And that is wrong. It's also against the Spanish Constitution, and I expect it to be overturned in Spanish courts.
OK, all right. Khadija, I suppose at its core, if we take it what they've said at face value, which is I haven't got the exact quote in front of me now, but it was along the lines of we don't want these practices that are alien to our own. I think they use that similar turn of phrase to that, i.e. they are a Catholic country. And they obviously feel in that particular area that the only real public building celebration should be for Catholicism. Do they have a right to do that? I mean, you know, in this country, we talk about being a Christian country, but I suppose we're not really anymore, are we?
But we see that this kind of attitude is prevalent, as I said, in Muslim-majority country. And as I was looking at the headlines with such lauded words such as outrage, anti-immigration, racism, Islamophobia, these words have been used to report a piece of information that a Spanish town has voted to prohibit the use of municipal buildings such as sports centers and civic halls for events marking Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. It is deliberately made, I think, all about an attack on Islam or an attack on Muslims without having a nuanced discussion on it. Muslims in Morocco will abstain from the animal sacrifice ritual. And the reasons are the deepening economic hardship and agriculture crisis. And this ritual is very important on the occasion of Eid. And in 2024, Tajikistan has prohibited religious celebration in public places. The reasons are to preserve local culture, prevent superstition and fanaticism, curb extravagance in celebrations, elevate the spirituality of the Tajik people, and protect the rights and freedoms of children, fostering their education in the spirit of humanism and patriotism. Not to mention that Tajikistan's population is 98% Muslim. So my concern is when these discussions on such topics have long been debated within Islamic tradition in Muslim majority countries, why can't we have these discussions in constructive manner in Western secular democratic countries without descending into whatabouteries? There has been, you know, Patrick, I don't know why we don't discuss these things here. There has been a reckoning and awakening in Muslim majority countries when it comes to counter religious fanaticism, while we are still refusing to drag ourselves out of this all is well utopian world where everything is fine as long as it is politically correct.
Well, okay, fine. And I'll give you a final word to you on this, Mohammed. Obviously, anything you want to come back to on that, but I'm just going to pick up on something that Khadija, I think, alluded to earlier, which is that maybe sometimes these very public and mass demonstrations and celebrations in very public areas are not necessarily just about the religious festival itself. It could be seen as a show of force or cultural dominance.
That's nonsense. I've attended open-air prayers occasionally in parks. It's there because it's a large number of people and they want to get together and pray. If other people get upset by seeing large numbers of Muslims together praying, then it's those other people that have got a problem.
Okay.
I think it's the same goes for the other side. And I want to emphasize on one thing, that there is no Islamic commandment that insists on celebrating these religious festivals in public places. In fact, such lavish festivals, meal, Iftar or Eid parties are deemed to be innovation in Islam. Muslims have been instructed through and through to focus on charity, which is zakat, during the month of Ramadan or on the occasions of Eid. I think that is the most important thing that Muslims they are instructed to do so, rather than indulging themselves into lavish and extravagant festivities.
So look, sorry, for very, very final word on this, Mohammed. I want to let you come back and then we're going to have to go, I'm afraid. But do you not think that there's any argument to say at all that perhaps in this case, when I mean indigenous culture, I mean the Spanish, obviously the kind of the Catholic Spanish, I suppose they would really be. Do they not have any right whatsoever to say, look, we're feeling a little bit like maybe we're being dominated here, and we're just going to keep it for our own religion? They don't have any right for that.
The Spanish are free to have as many Roman Catholic festivals as they want in these public places. What not entitled to do is to discriminate Muslims who want to hold their festivals. All
right. Thank you very much. Good head-to-head. Enjoyed it. Former chair of the Conservative Muslim Forum, Mohammed Amin, there, and journalist and commentator Khadija Khan.
All right, I don't know if you saw this or not, but basically there's a channel called Nick Tech. We've watched some of his videos before, and generally I like the comparisons. Just really good side-by-sides of like graphics comparisons. He's the one that did a lot of those videos that went viral, looking at like Suicide Squad's graphics versus Batman Arkham Knight. And it's like these games are 9 years apart. And you know, those types of videos doing the side-by-side comparisons. And kind of taking the torch in some ways from Cat, because he only shows up every once in a while, every like year or two. But he posted a video that started one heck of a firestorm, and it was simply this clip. In case you were wondering, Mafia: The Old Country doesn't have swimming physics, just like previous Mafia games. And people immediately, I mean, the comment section, you can start looking through. Can you space travel in it? I don't understand why swimming is so important. Gangsters don't swim. There's something called design discipline. How dare they? There's no need for swimming physics in a Mafia game. A Don doesn't swim. And this is where it's kind of evolved to now. Initially, for the first couple of days, this was overrun with people being like, I cannot believe that they did this. This is absolute garbage. What a joke. It's a total disaster. They're lazy. They're undisciplined, all this. But pretty quickly, the pendulum swung the other way with people calling it out for being an unnecessary comparison, or maybe a disingenuous point of I guess, complaint. And in his defense, this post, in case you're wondering, it doesn't have swimming physics just like previous Mafia games. He's just saying something. Yeah, it doesn't have swimming physics. The implication, of course, is that it's bad because of this. That's what's sort of implied by making this post. It is like, let's be real. Let's be real. I like Nick Tech. It's a little bit of rage bait, just a little. It's a little bit of rage bait. Let's not beat around the bush. That's what's happening here. And he follows up with further posts. Swimming is cut content. A user on Reddit, your boy got hit, found fully functional swimming physics in the definitive edition, where they actually had animations for the actual swimming, but they couldn't be used in like regular parts of the map, but you could sort of hard force it. Most likely just remnants of the controller and the code for the character, and you know, it's just manually turned off elsewhere. But you know, this type of thing has always been kind of stupid to me, because I'm like, okay, so you can't swim in Spider-Man games. Does that mean they're bad? You know, it doesn't hold. It doesn't really mean anything. And you can see the responses to these have been pretty universal on this. So actually, Tina Turl Tourist, I feel like I'm aging out of the gaming sphere, because I see this and ask myself, does this game even need swimming? Should dev time be devoted to it? And people in the comments are saying this is unacceptable for a 2025 game. I don't know. I just don't think games need every mechanic. And this is why I think this has gone sort of viral and people have talked about it so much, because throughout the whole 360, the whole PS4, Xbox One era, even in the early PS5 era, things have been overwhelmed with this idea that games have to be AAA across the board, both in price, but then also if they're in a big name franchise, they need to be AAA in scope, scale, otherwise they're bad. And this is what's often compared, where we look at, and it's usually the giveaway that maybe we're being a little unfair, is when we start to do side-by-side comparisons with things that are not the same. Like if you're comparing a linear narrative game to an open world adventure game, there are going to be differences. There's going to be differences in animation quality. There's going to be differences in cutscene quality. There's going to be differences across the board in all of these things. One exception probably being Rockstar games. Like Red Dead looks amazing even now, despite being open world. It's still fantastic. That's going to be true always. Rockstar is just almost always the exception to the rule. But, you know, just because you can find a side-by-side to say, hey, this linear game from 5-6 years ago looks better than this open world game from this month, that doesn't necessarily mean that this game from this month is bad. Maybe it's not as impressive visually as the game from back then, or animation wise. It doesn't mean that this game needs to be discarded and thrown away, right? Not every game needs to be a gigantic AAA behemoth that has every single feature you could imagine. And this is something that also was kind of funny, because it was brought up with one of the devs from Larian, of course. You've seen him, no doubt. Very AFK, Cromwelp. He replied to this and said, "This reminds me of when we showed Baldur's Gate 3 to someone, an executive or whatever, a wealth of mechanics. And with zero emotion, the executive just goes, 'Can you swim in the game?' Like, bro, this isn't a mechanical whack-a-mole. Endlessly layering mechanics maketh a good game not." Exactly. Like, you can have an amazing game where you can't swim, and it's okay. You can have an amazing game where maybe it doesn't even have a branching narrative. Can you imagine? And that's okay. Maybe it doesn't have endless open world activities, and that's okay. Not every game needs to be an open world game. And my stance for a long time has been, if you can't do something well, often it's best just to not do it at all. If you can't do the open world formula well, maybe it's best just to not do it. If you can't come up with ways to keep the player engaged in a massive open world that's unique, dynamic, and interesting, maybe just don't do it. If you can't have 1,000 different planets to land on and make that interesting in terms of a gameplay loop, maybe don't put 1,000 goddamn planets in your game. Maybe do 1 or 2. Dare I say. But if you can't do it well, maybe just don't do it at all. And Mafia: The Old Country is a game which is very transparent in the fact that it is not doing everything. It will not try to fill the open world with a ton of dynamic encounters, with tons of side quests for you to go and, you know, bounce around all over the map, with a reputation system, with tons of branching dialogue choices and stuff. It doesn't try to do that. That's not the kind of game it is. It is trying to be a linear narrative game in a big map that they will also let you drive around and explore if you want to, but that's not the core of the game. The core of the game is to tell a story with interesting writing and characters and pretty solid set pieces. And in that pursuit, I think it does a pretty damn good job. But there's plenty of gamers out there that have gotten accustomed to this idea that if a game is not a Rockstar level gargantuan monstrosity, therefore it's bad. And that's where the riskiness can come in, where you'll just start to realize you're not enjoying anything. You can never have fun, because anytime you play anything, you're like, well, it's not as good as this masterpiece. Yeah. And it's also the other side of this too, is that, you know, Metacritic scores are usually a pretty good indication of overall quality or consensus quality from critics, of course. 10 out of 10 games, absolutely you should play. 9 out of 10s, very often you should play. Like 7 to 8 out of 10 can still be well worth your time. But for some reason, it feels like right now, if a game is not like a 9 or a 10, it's bad or it's disappointing. It's like, what game was it? There was one game recently where it got like a Metacritic score in the high 80s, and a studio congratulated the studio for the successful launch and for the good reviews. Like, congrats on the awesome reviews. And it was like a game in the like 80s, high 80s, I think, in Metacritic. And people were replying to that post saying, are you really proud of like an 86 on Metacritic? What are we doing? What are you talking about? That's a good score. That's a very good score. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a Metacritic score above 80, period? Like, what are we doing? That's a very good score. And, you know, whenever you have these discussions, I think maybe the crucial bit is to ask yourself, you know, is this just the gaming sphere on X? Is this just the gaming sphere on social media? Do average gamers really care? Like, does an actual person who just wants a good game really care? And they might not. They might not. But where I think it can have an impact is in the realm of peer pressure and word of mouth. That can absolutely harm a game's potential for success. If you have a game that is really solid but has really bad word of mouth, you know what you get? You end up with one of the most underrated games of the last decade, in my opinion, and I have a feeling a lot of you guys will agree with this as well. Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy, the game, is so unbelievably underrated, it's ridiculous. It is so impressive. Just every element of it is polished, is refined, everything from like the team hype sessions to the combat, which is pretty solid and engaging as well. The story is really impressively well done as well. Set pieces are massive and interesting. It's a really, really good game, but it had really bad word of mouth at launch because everybody thought it was going to be another Marvel's Avengers game, which was a live service disaster in its own right. And so it didn't have good word of mouth, and the game unfortunately flopped as a result. And I believe Square Enix said it was a significant miss from their projections and their targets. And it's too bad, because this was a game that should have been rewarded with overwhelming success. It really should have, in my opinion. It was just that good. This animation wasn't, but everything else, everything else, very, very good. Very good. And if you can play this today, you absolutely should. But word of mouth can, you know, help a game explode in popularity. It can also really hurt it if it's not given the time of day. And then the Wooster, thank you for that one. Couldn't you make the argument that with increasing game prices, this in turn would make consumers demand more from their products? If you could only afford a few games per year, consumers want the most bang for their buck. Absolutely, but I think bang for your buck also, you got to ask, what does that Like, what's that standard? Is it quality or is it quantity? For some gamers, it's quantity. They just want more. They want 1,000 hours of game time. And if they don't get it, it wasn't worth their time and money. Other people just want high quality. Some maybe want both. But I think it depends on what you're looking for. Ultimately, I think for most people, it's quality. They understand if they're getting a really, really good 15 hours, that's better than a mediocre 50, you know. But I think that that is perhaps fair to bring up. But even with like a Mafia example, we're talking about a game that's $50 instead of a full $70 release. And it still is like a 12 to 15 hour game, depending on how much exploration and collectible stuff you want to do. It's a solid length. But again, like, I feel like over the last decade, we've gotten conditioned to the point where it feels as though if a game is not a 40, 50 hour game, people automatically hand wave it away as too short. And if it doesn't have a lot of these massive open world features or just sheer volume of content features, it's also therefore unacceptable or bad. And that causes a lot of these games that are in that like 8 out of 10 range that are good, like solid B- or B grade games, they just never stand a chance because we're like, whatever. But it's also perhaps, you know, it's just a broader reflection on the industry. People don't have as much money and competition is higher than it's ever been. So people are going to be selective, and there's that. But at the very least, you know, people are looking at it and people are responding to this discourse. Pretty at this point, I feel like the response has been overwhelming. And like this one, I didn't realize it was up here. 99,000 likes. I feel like people are standing up and being like, no, I'm happy with this. Not every game needs swimming. You know, the game isn't bad because it lacks swimming. You know, it's not fair to dismiss it because of that. I'm not saying Nick Tech was trying to dismiss the game because it lacks swimming. I personally think this was a little bit of rage bait. I think Nick knows what he's doing. I think he's rage baiting a little bit. We do a little trolling. But I think the response has shown pretty clearly that gamers, at least a lot of them, are starting to be like, you know what? It doesn't actually matter. Very AFK followed this up. The realities of game design are such that each feature has a cost: manpower, time, budget. Why not just can set a producer on fire? Try it. It's funny. Better to not swim if you're not going to do anything with it than to add it simply to have it. Exactly. Like, just having it so somebody can check off a box doesn't really make sense. It just doesn't. The hitherto most common version of this is when a dev shows a game and the first question is there a day-night cycle? I'm convinced many day-night cycles exist to save PR people from murder charges. That's funny. I think, you know, and to be clear, there are some games where perhaps it is fair to bring this up and it is fair to question it. Like, is it fair to ask day-night cycle? Let's go with that. Day-night cycle in something like AC Shadows. It has a day-night cycle because the game is called AC Shadows, and it's useful in the gameplay for them to cycle between day and night. That just makes sense, right? In a different game, like, what would an example be? Expedition 33. Does that need a day-night cycle? No, it doesn't. The game would not be better. I think if it did have a day-night cycle, most people would not notice or care. I don't think it would matter, you know, because it just doesn't have an impact on the game that they're producing, that they're making. So it doesn't make sense to spend the resources to do it. Does Undertale, or like, what would another, like, even more ridiculous? Does chess need a day-night cycle? You know, like, no, of course not. Don't be stupid. Yeah, at different times in the game's runtime, the lighting changes. It's chess. Shut up. Who cares? Like, what are we doing? Anyway, this started a whole discussion and a whole debate over the whole thing. It's very, very interesting. Nick Tech followed this up. Update: Mafia the Old Country does have swimming mechanics built in game. When you jump in deep water, Enzo goes back to shore and you can see he is indeed swimming. The devs clearly thought of this feature, added it, and decided it's best to not include it by design choice, just like Mafia Definitive Edition. In my case here, I was wondering if it's possible to swim. I didn't try jumping straight into deep waters, but instead tried to gradually go deeper, hitting an invisible wall. I see nothing wrong with not having swimming physics. My expectations when playing this game was to compare it to previous Mafia games, some of which were open world and had swimming physics, but this is a linear game by design and choice. The expectations are set properly, and I still believe $50 for this game is an incredible value after some stuttering issues are ironed out on PC. And I think, you know, this also kickstarted a discussion. I'm glad that he followed up with this and answered more clearly what he thinks of it. But I think that this also, people call this Copycat syndrome, where there's this desire to look at like a game and compare it and then therefore dismiss the new one because it doesn't match one-to-one. It's like sometimes things are cut, sometimes things are changed in pursuit of other things. And that's just what you're doing when you're making a game, is that you're constantly figuring out what we should put effort into, what we shouldn't. And the whole problem of this generation has been that budgets are out of control and prices for players have gotten out of control, even to the point where giga corporations like Microsoft, $4 trillion companies, are having to step back their pricing, go back from 80 as they initially announced for Outer Worlds 2 and go back and say, okay, we'll only charge 70, because the reaction was so strong against that. Players are just fed up with the price hikes, and scope is so out of control that these games are freakishly expensive to make. And the only way you really get that fixed, I don't think you can endlessly raise prices. Gamers only have so much money, and we've seen that even with the response from Microsoft walking back the price hike. So now I think what you're saying is, okay, how else do we change it? How else do we fix the equation? Because if we can't raise prices here, we have to lower the cost here, and we got to cut some costs by making smaller games, by not trying to turn everything into the next Assassin's Creed or Red Dead or GTA, and being tighter with the scopes, and maybe not try to turn everything into a massive quadruple A monstrosity. Maybe you start smaller with like a double A experience that's a little tighter, a little more refined, a smaller dev team that's really passionate, and you give them plenty of time to work on it instead of having 2,000 devs work on something for a year and a half, you know? So I think that this is, you know, a good indication. The passionate response to this initial post, I think it shows that the industry more broadly is healing in a way from this trend that was so prominent during the 2010s. And gamers are now much more open to tighter experiences, because games like Mafia: The Old Country used to be very, very common, especially back in like the 360 PS3 era. There were a lot of these tighter budget, tighter scoped games that didn't try to do everything. You know, they were just trying to do what they were trying to do and nothing more, nothing less. But they kind of died out, especially in the age of the blockbusters on PS4. And now it looks like players are open to it because of products like Game Pass, which make them much more palatable, I think, just to give them a shot. But even with Mafia: The Old Country, which is, as far as I know, not on any of those services, players are still interested and open to it. So I'm here for it, because I would like more games like Mafia: The Old Country. This is like exactly the kind of package I like. It's 12 hours long. It's not ridiculously oversized and bloated with tons of garbage. And it's like, hey, we know how to do a story well. We know how to do cinematics well and set pieces well. Let's do that. That's our game. And they just do that well. Yeah, does the combat and stealth work amazingly well? No, not really. But it's good enough to service what they are really good at. And then it's also a package that's discounted and is at a cheaper price point. And I think we need more of that, frankly. Better water physics than Starfield. At least it has a map at launch, I'll give you that. Yeah, I like smaller packages, Taylor. Exactly. And if you guys are here on the stream today, you probably do too. Because you're watching me. Sadness. Jesus. He took my thing.
Trump is taking over Washington, D.C., and he's planning on also taking over other major cities. Thank God. Thank God. Finally, somebody's putting this shit under control. Oh, please. Thank you, Donald. Holy shit.
President Trump will be holding a news conference addressing his crackdown on crime in D.C. and his plan to clean the place up.
That's right.
And make our capital beautiful again.
Madeline Rivera joins us live from the Capitol with the latest. Hey, Maddie. Good morning. The White House says their efforts are in line with an executive order the president signed in March to make D.C. safer. He says, in part on Truth Social, the homeless have to move out immediately. We'll give you places to stay, but far from the Capitol. The criminals, you don't have to move out. We're going to put you in jail.
The place to stay is called jail.
Jail where you belong. It's all going to happen very fast, just like the border. President Trump has mobilized agents
to put you in jail where you belong.
Several federal agencies for at least 7 days to fight violent crime. These include the ATF, DEA, and U.S. Park Police. The Washington Post reports the FBI is also reassigning more than 100 agents to overnight shifts to help local police in a decision
to catch them all.
All of the National Guard could come later on today.
Yes.
D.C.'s mayor says the city's crime rate is down 20%, though, compared to last year, and she's concerned that the Guard may not be used efficiently, but she acknowledges the president has the power to deploy them.
While it is always the president's prerogative to use federal law enforcement or the National Guard even, you know, I've talked on your show before that the D.C. National Guard is the president's National Guard. So that's always his prerogative. And federal law enforcement is always on the street in D.C., and we always work cooperatively with them.
The president
Let me watch that full clip, because that was one of the ones that I found. Let's listen to the whole thing.
One of the things that we have seen over and over from the president, from his team, you know, Stephen Miller saying it's like Baghdad in Ethiopia. They seem to hold. One of the things that we have seen over and over from the president, from his team, you know, Stephen Miller saying it's like Baghdad in Ethiopia. They seem to hold their harshest criticism sometimes for cities that are majority black and brown.
Nobody gives a fuck about this. Nobody gives a fuck about this rhetoric anymore. Nobody cares about this obvious race baiting. Nobody gives a shit, period. And also, by the way, wouldn't that be a good thing? If they're saying these cities need a bunch of help because they're overrun by these problems, and these are majority minority areas, wouldn't that be helping those people? Shouldn't you be saying thank you? What is this? Do you really think that all of the normal law-abiding citizens want to see rust bases built around every 7-Eleven? No.
Do you see that, and what do you think that means?
Just being honest.
I think that I have been dealing kind of with this issue for a number of years. It's kind of easy fodder on the campaign trail. But now we're talking about governing, and my job is to focus on making sure our city is running well, and people enjoy a great quality of life.
Well, then why is there, if you're enjoying, why are they living on the street? Why are they on the street? Why is there a bunch of crime? Why is there people like fucking robbing shit and like just causing problems? Like what? Because like, yeah, I mean, you're not doing a good job, right? I mean, like, because if you were doing a good job, this wouldn't need to happen.
And I think we're doing a really good job.
What's going on with this?
We do need the federal government's help, as I mentioned, because they have an outsized influence on our criminal justice system. We need more prosecutors. We need more judges. There are other ways to help. Even we want to rebuild our jail, and there are ways that the feds can help with that. But also just doing their part, cutting the grass, fixing the fountains, making sure that federal law enforcement is doing all of the policing that they can do. And I just have to say thank you to MPS, FBI, ATF, who always work cooperatively with us. And
it's actually crazy that like she didn't even go into this race baiting bullshit that like this guy was trying to do. Like, what a dumb fucking retard, man. Like, yeah, she knows better, she's not going against Trump. No, the thing is that they're trying to get it into a fucking race issue and turn that into some bullshit, right? Good on her. Yeah, she dodged that. You know, you're right. And so this is the problem. Man. Not looking good, huh? Holy shit. I don't know where this is particularly, but this is what happens. You don't enforce the laws. People come in and they steal all the shit. Can you believe that? Wow. Where's the ice cream? That's where the ice cream's supposed to be. This is the USSR? Yes. Where is it? I bet they still have pistachio ice cream. So that's it. Yeah, what's happening? Nothing. Nothing's happening. That's the problem. That's the whole issue.
Called out youth crime in particular.
Look at it.
Just over the weekend, D.C. police say a young man fired another group of young people with a stolen gun in a popular neighborhood.
Wow.
He was arrested, and there were no victims. Now, a juvenile curfew is in effect in the area where the shooting took place.
Yep.
The president says his announcement this morning, though, like you said, Brian, will not only be
the
about...
thing is, they're trying to put the kids in jail, too.
I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs and crews and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are.
Yep.
They can be in DuPont Circle, but they know that we can't touch them. Why? Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I convict someone of shooting another person with an illegal gun on a public bus in the chest. Intent to kill? I convict him. And you know what the judge gives him? Probation. Says you should go to college. We need to go after the D.C. Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this.
This is completely true, by the way. If you're 14, you shoot somebody, you need to just go to jail. It's not, and at that point, it's not like about like whether it's like your parents or not. It's about everybody else that's around you, right? Because like if you're crashing out and shooting people with a gun at 14, you're obviously a danger to society. You're a huge danger to society. So really, it's not even about you anymore. It's about everybody else. Like the world can't put up with that. Yeah.
Concept of, no cash bail. We need to recognize that the people who matter.
I think put the parents in jail too, maybe. Maybe put both of them in jail.
Are the law-abiding citizens.
Yes.
And it starts today. But it's not going to end today. Because the president is going to do everything we need to do to make sure that these emboldened criminals understand we see you, we're watching you, and we're going to change the law to catch you. And my final note is this. These kids understand that the jurisdiction is...
they can get... The kids know they can get away with it. We did the same thing whenever we were kids. Yeah, for sure.
Through the state attorney general, Brian Schwab. I did a poster of the young man from Doge who was beaten bloody with a severe concussion, a broken nose. And then I did a poster of what happens to those kids, because I can't arrest them, I can't prosecute them. They go to family court, and they get to do yoga and arts and crafts.
Nope.
Enough.
Nope.
It changes today.
We're putting them in the coal mines, manual labor for 30 years. You're done.
Thank you, Mr. President.
That's right. That's it. It's weird the president doesn't want to do the same thing with his powerful PDF friends. Well, that's the way it is. You got to take what you can get. Anyway, and again, I think that you're just trying to find a way to get mad about this. This is a universally good thing. It's a completely positive thing. There's nothing negative about this at all. It's a good thing. This is apparently Trump in D.C. Oh, geez. Well, and there we go. And we'll get to this, but let me go back. We'll finish this one first.
Crime. It would also be about making the nation's capital more beautiful, saying the city is only getting dirtier and less attractive. Lawrence Ainsley and Brian.
Hey, Maddie, the one thing I would say is, do you notice both leaders, different parties, but they're very respectful for each other. It's kind of rare. The mayor was respectful to the president. Here the crime stats are down, but I'll take his help. And the president said, she's a great person.
Oh, yeah, because she can't do any... The thing is that, what is she going to do? Is she going to say no, and he's going to be like, okay, I'm going to do it anyway? Like, that's going to be over pretty fast.
But I got to insert myself.
Yeah, you know, it was interesting hearing the D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser's tone over the weekend talking about this federal resources, local police. They've been very cooperative on this issue. But how could you not, you know, who doesn't want to make D.C. safer at this point? Yeah.
So true.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Maddie.
All right. Thank you, Maddie.
No, I wonder.
This is the issue of our time. It's not just D.C., it's all these liberal cities all across the country. And
He's right.
this just happens to be the capital.
He's completely
and
right.
The gangbangers have been getting away with it. The teens are carjacking all over the place. I know they want to say
them Kia boys.
that the numbers are down, but if you talk to people that are there, they don't feel that way.
Well, she said the numbers are down 35%.
Well, nah, bro. If you're at 200%, you go down 35%. You're still ahead by fucking, what would that be, 30%? So going, like, the thing is that, like, you have a frame of reference 35%. 35% of what? No, 200%, 35%. So that would be 70%. So you'd have a remaining 30% because you'd be at 130%. Because 35% of 200% would be 70%. Guys. Guys, are y'all kidding me? What's going on?
Or I think she said 2 years ago they were down 35%, and they've gone down again over the last year.
Okay.
But if you look at the statistics for the teenagers, for the juveniles, that's the problem.
Gotta
and they're staying
put the
out.
kids in jail. This is what I said. See, I said this. Everybody got mad at me. They said, don't put the kids in jail. I said, you have to do it.
So late. So good for them for implementing this curfew.
Thank
and
God.
the president addressing the homeless problem with those pictures. It looks so disgusting to have all the trash on the street and all the tent encampments.
Well, I tell you, I was at Union Station 2 weeks ago.
It's the rest
and just on
bases.
just my eye, anecdotally.
Which is their subway.
Much
where the
better.
subway comes in.
This is really retarded, but okay. So basically, I've been doing this thing where every night, if I don't pass out on the floor at 11 p.m. because I'm tired, every night I go to 7-Eleven. And I go to a different 7-Eleven every night. And I check to have, do you know, like the chocolate eclairs from 7-Eleven with the cream filling in it? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? Yes. Okay. So those are my favorite. I go to a different 7-Eleven. I was on 7-Eleven number 5 yesterday. 5 different 7-Elevens. 4 of them did not have any eclairs. There were no eclairs at all. I would take pictures and send them to people. I would say, look, do you see any eclairs? They would say no. I would be like, me either. Yesterday, I went to a 7-Eleven. There were no rust bases. There were no Nevrons. I went inside. 4 eclairs. I ate the entire thing. Before I even got back to my house, I was sick in the driveway. Great night. Incredible night. Bingo. Oh, yeah. Ate the entire thing. All 4? No, what do you think I am, fat? Fuck no, I bought 1. The fuck's wrong with you? No, of course I didn't eat 4 eclairs. You fat piece of shit. Fuck no. I got 1. I ate the whole thing. I felt sick. I had to lay down. And then I got up. I played a video game. It made me mad. I uninstalled it. I played another video game. I got bored of it. I reinstalled the video game. I uninstalled. And then I'm playing that again. And so that's what happened. I went to sleep. That was what happened yesterday. So, yeah.
Subway, yeah.
And so, what's the point? Right, I forgot what the point is. All of the other 4 7-Elevens had Nevrons everywhere. Multiple people had like tables. They had houses built next to the car wash at 7-Eleven. They built a house out of fucking like campaign signs. The only 7-Eleven that had eclairs didn't have a single fucking person there. Not a single one. The whole eclair? Yeah, I ate the entire thing on the way home.
Amtrak comes
Yeah.
in. So I think it looks better already, but they said 121 more FBI agents.
Yeah.
But Lawrence, what do you do with teenagers?
So what's the connection? The connection is that you can't have nice things when hostile NPCs could be present in an area. Vendors are not able to sell their quantity of goods whenever there could be a thief amongst them. And I think that eclairs are the highest quality 7-Eleven product. And so if there are no eclairs, that means that this is a PvP zone. So if there are eclairs at the 7-Eleven, this means that this is not a PvP 7-Eleven. You see what I'm saying? You picking up what I'm putting down? Okay.
So
It's the same thing, by the way. You go to a CVS. Let's say you're in Austin. You go to a CVS in Montopolis on the east side. You know what's behind a glass shelf? A toothbrush. A bottle of cola. A hair tie. That's it. You go over to Lakeway, and that's where all the rich people are, by the way. That's where, like, you know, fucking Michael Dell has a house. You know what's behind a shelf? Nothing. You just go in there. And that's it. Good old East Austin? Yes. Not sunscreen, I bet? Oh, I don't know about that. Oh, that was... You got me there. I don't think it's a race thing. Honestly, I really don't. I mean, that's not really the minority or the majority group over there anyway. It's not. No, you did get me on that one.
Agents, but Lawrence, what do you do with
It's a
teenagers?
class thing. It is.
So 16, 17, you can't charge them as adult, yet they're beating up guys like Big Balls.
I know you guys are disappointed that I'm not a racist. I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I hate to let you down.
You know, and with the shooting Redskin running backs.
You change the statute and you still charge them as adults.
Yeah.
If they're part of this, or
exactly, yeah. How do you fix the problem with kids committing crime? You change the rule and then you put them in jail. Problems, fucking obviously. Like, duh. What do you think you do?
You put them in the program where they can't leave the juvenile detention facility. But right now you have DAs that are essentially not doing their job. So what they plan on doing is the feds charging us. That way the U.S. attorney can handle it, Janine Pirro.
That's
yeah,
right.
I like that Muriel Bowser did say it's his prerogative. If the president wants to use federal law enforcement, he can. But she did mention over the weekend in lots of different interviews that crime is down. She said specifically it's decreased 26% over the past year. But clearly there's still a problem. You have that
well, no, because again, if crime is down, there could be other reasons for that. So if there's crimes happening and they don't get reported, or there's not an enforcement action, there's no report that the crime can be used as a statistical frame of reference. So when you've got people that are committing crimes and it doesn't get reported, then nobody fucking knows. Aren't people saying the books are cooked or something? Yeah, I think so. Or just fewer arrests, exactly.
Congressional intern that was shot. He was accidentally in the line of fire. Someone was trying to hijack his car or take a lady's car, and he intervened to protect her, and he ends up, that's the other guy.
He got beat up senseless by a group of teens.
Yeah.
That was
so
crazy.
They definitely need to clean it up. I don't
Big
understand why
balls.
these leaders don't want to work together. Look, I would say if I'm leading, I would say the numbers are down, but yes, thank you, Mr.
Here's
President.
the reason why. It's because a lot of people have convinced themselves that crime is a socioeconomic issue. And I think that to an extent it is, but the way you solve that socioeconomic issue is that you remove the criminals and you add in opportunities to that area. Like, because again, the way that you saw it is, no, I mean, there's plenty of rich people that commit crimes. Like, they just don't go to jail. And the difference is that, yeah, it's the whole Epstein thing, right? I mean, look at that. Numbers are cooked. Yeah, it's just different crimes in a lot of cases, too. But the point is, though, at the end of the day, there's plenty of poor people that don't steal shit out of a CVS. Just because you're poor doesn't mean you get to steal shit out of the CVS. And if you are doing it, you've got to be a little bit better at it because you're obviously getting caught constantly. And so anyway, but like small crimes, yeah. And so anyway, it's an IQ thing. There's a lot of corollaries, right? But my point is that it doesn't do anybody any favors allowing crime to be in an area. Because what ends up happening is that when the CVS turns into, I mean, I'm pretty sure that certain CVSs on PvP servers, they probably have more restrictions than a gun store. Like, you need to go through more layers of protection to be able to get a box of fucking chocolates than you do to buy ammo. The crime's bad. Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. And so guess what happens after that? Nobody wants to go to a store like that because it's fucking annoying. And so they stop going to that store. The store loses money because it's getting stolen from constantly. And then they close. So the store closes. The people there don't have a job, and then the place just becomes a bigger and bigger shithole. And so when you allow the crime to happen, what you do is you allow a community to be defined by its bottom 10 to 20% of people. And really, I think it's the bottom about 2 to 5% of people that are committing all of these crimes. That's it. And so really, 95 to 90% of the population is now being punished for everybody. And their opportunities, their lifestyle, their quality of life is decreased massively because of this problem. And again, the people pushing the, oh, well, don't you, it's a socioeconomic issue, like it's racist to put them in jail, or, oh, it's unfair to do that, like they're doing it as they have to. The people that are saying that never have to deal with this because they're in a gated community. They go to CVS and they just go pick up a toothbrush and it's easy. They don't even understand it.
Bring in
Property
additional
values?
people.
Yeah.
I want to keep our community safe. Unlike Gavin Newsom, that trial is going to take place today.
Right.
The one out in California where he's suing Donald Trump.
Oh.
He doesn't want the National Guard.
The only thing I'd add is, too, he's going to talk about the physical renovation and condition of the Capitol. He's going to make sure these federal buildings are coming in on schedule and not being, gouged like we see so many times. And he says he wants to make the place look good again. Now he's doing it with the White House.
That's crazy.
Now he's doing it with the Capitol.
So in just a few hours, President Trump will outline his plan to stop crime in our nation's capital, as grieving families say.
You can't do that. What do you mean? And so anyway, here we go. And this is him talking about it. Here we go.
So as I mentioned, just a few hours, President Trump will be...
Is this the one? Let me make sure I get the right one. No, this is the other one. Sorry, I apologize. There it is. So Trump has deployed the National Guard. That's it.
So we watched it together. President Trump wrapping up a lengthy news conference declaring today Liberation Day in our nation's capital.
Liberation Day.
And he promises to aggressively crack down on crime and clean up what he calls our once beautiful capital. The White House says these efforts are in line with an executive order the president signed in March to make D.C. safer. This is Outnumbered. I'm Harris Faulkner, here with my co-host Emily Campagno. Also joining us today, Carly Shimkus, co-host of Fox and Friends First, Lisa Booth, Fox News political analyst, and John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General, UC Berkeley law professor, and former Justice Thomas law clerk. Well, here is the president moments ago.
This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. Today, we're declaring public safety emergency in the District of Columbia, and Attorney General Pam Bondi, who's fantastic, is taking command of the Metropolitan Police Department. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C., and they're going to be allowed to do their job properly. You want to have safety in the streets. You want to be able to leave your apartment or your house where you live.
It's fucking ridiculous that people have to get terrorized for this shit. It's ridiculous that people should have to live with this. I feel like using the National Guard is a good idea. I don't give a fuck. Like, just do whatever you need to do. I don't care. Put the military out there. Like, do whatever you need. Like, whatever it takes to get rid of the problem. Like, whatever the cheapest and easiest solution is.
feel safe in going to a store to buy a newspaper or buy something.
RoboCop, yeah.
And you don't have that
It was
now.
like robotic dogs from Boston
Look, the
Dynamics.
president really leaned hard on the big picture. Because it's not just about Washington, D.C. It's about soft on crime policies across America.
Exactly.
For example, he's going after no cash bail laws, and he's going really hammering down on liberal prosecutors in Democratic-led cities like New York and Chicago.
We have other cities also that are bad, very bad. You look at Chicago, how bad it is. You look at Los Angeles, how bad it is.
Yeah.
We have other cities that are very bad. New York has a problem. And then you have, of course, Baltimore and Oakland. We don't even mention that anymore. They're so far gone. We're not going to let it happen. We're not going to lose our cities over this. And this will go further. We're starting very strongly with D.C., and we're going to clean it up real quick, very quickly, as they say.
John, that sounds like a shock.
What is this here? What do you mean? Yeah, why are you agreeing? You have no idea what the fuck's going on. No one's fuck plan. So this is the reason why I agree. Okay, so like obviously you're unhappy about this. As a DC resident, people have been shot outside my apartment. This is dumb as fuck. Will not change anything. That's fine. I mean, I don't really care like what the solution is necessarily. I think that any action is something that is moving in a direction that's beneficial. So there is an action that's being taken that is improving the situation. Like, obviously, it might not solve the problem, but at least something is happening. Like, do you think it's not a problem? Like, I mean, I don't understand this. Like, is crime not a problem there? Or what do you mean? Also, by the way, remember all those riots in LA? Remember how that instantly disappeared whenever they put the military and the National Guard out there? It went away because nobody wants to fuck around with them because they know they're going to lose. Yeah, that's it. Like it already worked in LA. I saw it happen. Everybody saw it happen. Wow, what a big surprise when you bring out a bunch of people in Humvees and machine guns that everybody stops committing crime. What a fucking surprise. Nobody could have guessed that. It's not an effectively strategy to stop crime. It's one to put the federal government and Trump in charge of law enforcement. Well, if they didn't want Trump in charge of law enforcement, they should have taken care of it themselves. They didn't. They can't. So that's the thing. If you didn't want that to happen, you shouldn't have created this situation because obviously they can't solve it. Very clearly, they don't know what they're doing, or this wouldn't be a problem in the first place. So I don't know what you're even saying. Every city has crime. Is there any level of crime justification for federal intervention? You said earlier, I knew you would make that argument. You said earlier, as a DC resident where people have been shot outside my apartment, you are living in a PvP server. You, as an American citizen, do not deserve to live in a PvP server. Stop fighting against people that want you to be able to live in peace. Yes, they might not have the best solution immediately, but they're trying to solve your problem. They're trying to solve your problem, and you should at least appreciate that, because very clearly the local government doesn't give a fuck.
Across the bow, we are not going to lose our cities over this. This is more than just a shout out to the criminals. This is those blue lead cities and the way that they're doing business legally.
It's a good point, Harris. Look, the president can't do a lot about crime in the inner cities in places like Oakland, where I work, or San Francisco, where I'm from, or Philadelphia, where I grew up. These are places where crime has gone out of control. But the one place that the president can put law and order into effect is Washington, D.C.
Exactly, and if he's able to do it there and lower all of the crime and stop this problem from happening, what it does is it gives him more political capital to expand that principle to other groups of areas and other cities and stuff like that. So that's really what happens, is that because like if he's able to take over Washington, D.C. and suppress all the crime, put all of the Nevrons in jail, and solve this problem, and it looks a lot better and people can see it, then he will have the political capital to do that in New York or to do that in Chicago. It'll be a template. Yeah, exactly. It's a test. You don't have to live with such crime. No, we don't. We don't have to live with this bullshit. We don't have to put up with this trash. Absolutely not.
Made the District of Columbia a federal city. They didn't want it under the control of Virginia or Maryland or any other state. It is uniquely the duty and responsibility of the president to enforce the laws, and those laws include the criminal laws for public safety in Washington, D.C. Now, he doesn't just need to nationalize the D.C. police and declare an emergency, which can go on for 30 days. He can send in federal law enforcement, which he's done. He can send in the National Guard. There's no governor to fight with, like the governor of California, to send the National Guard in. They're not limited to being there for 30 days. It's going to take time, but I think the president can use D.C. to produce good policies and demonstrate to the rest of the country how to turn around their crime-ridden inner cities.
So real quickly, so what we heard the president do...
Yeah, because if he's able to do this, then everybody else is going to be like, well, why can't you do this for where we live? Because the reality is that a lot of people like to virtue signal about how this isn't bothering them. I see how average people behave. Average people are made very uncomfortable by the hostile PvP NPCs that are outside of Walmarts and 7-Elevens. People with families don't want to go there. People that are older don't want to go there. Anybody who is in any way vulnerable at all, and just people that just don't want to have anything to do with it, don't want to go there. They don't want to have to deal with that. They don't have PvP enabled. They don't want to deal with that. There's no town guards. Yeah, exactly. It's about the kids. Yeah. And so, like, the truth is that there's a lot of political correctness that I think constrains this conversation. But I think the truth is that while a lot of people might publicly say, oh, well, we have to help the homeless, etc. Yeah, sure, you do. But at the same time, helping them doesn't mean letting them live at 7-Eleven. That's it. And I think that people do want this to be solved. And they want these people gone, period. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It doesn't matter what's happening. There are way more people that actually really don't like this. And again, the way you can tell is what people do. Have you guys seen people that, like, you know, are uncomfortable around, like, these groups of people? Like, you know, like some Fent zombie or something like that. Some, like, random homeless person sitting in front of a store, like they walk their kids around it, etc. Like, we've all seen this happen, right? It's because it scares them and they don't want to have anything to do with it. Yeah. And so when something like this shooting in Austin, yeah, I'll look at the shooting after this. But yeah, what do you say to the bleeding hearts, like my younger brother who believes this is some form of martial law? Thank God. Thank God. He should have done this 6 months ago. Yeah, finally.
Today is he put the D.C. police under the AG Pam Bondi's control after announcing that the people from the feds will be in charge. That's what you're talking about.
Yes. Under the Home Rule Act of 1973, the president can take over the D.C. police, but that doesn't apply to the other law enforcement assets Paul was just talking about in your last show, the DEA, the FBI, and then, of course, the National Guard. Now, look, if you had asked me, I think this whole Home Rule thing has been a mistake and a constitutional error, because I don't think it was a good idea for the federal government to ever give D.C. self-government. That was not what the founders intended. They wanted the federal government to always remain in control of the District of Columbia. So we're seeing 50 years now of misrule, misgovernment.
I would say the contextualization between the obligation of the federal government versus the state government was really redefined after the Civil War. And it's been redefined a few times after that, for example, like in the civil rights era. So I don't think you can really look at the founding fathers and what they intended for the United States and say that this is the metric that we should be operating off of, because I think that we've had a couple of, like, pretty big balance patches since then where that's been redefined. I mean, I can see what he's saying, but, like, in general, like, that's it.
The murder rate in D.C. has historically always been higher than in other cities in the country.
That's fascinating, Emily, because we're actually technically watching the rates of crime fall across the country, but in certain areas, it's the pure violence of the crime that's popping right now as an outbreak, coupled with people living on the streets and encampments in many of those blue-led cities.
Right, and if D.C. was a state, it would be the highest homicide rate per capita 4 years running. It's been, frankly, an abominable destruction of what could have been a very peaceful and, I think, example of how government should run. I think what I love about this...
Isn't that fucking embarrassing that, like, the Capitol's the PvP server? What the fuck? Cities are always hated on by conservative speaking. This always happens. I don't take them seriously. This isn't a conservatives or liberals issue. This is a people don't want violent crime and random people building rust bases all around the city issue. This isn't a this is not a party issue.
And I say it with a caveat that this is the first step. There was an excellent articulation today of exactly why this perfect storm has been created. And we saw firsthand as a White House press corps member talked about how he had been robbed at gunpoint by a child and nothing happened. The trauma and the stress are real, and there are lives we cannot get back, including that
of a... It's crazy. Like, why would we put up with, like, there's no reason to put up with this shit at all. Why would anybody want to put up with this shit? This is crazy. Like, yeah, just get rid of them. Like, yeah, I don't get it.
White House intern whose mother to this day says, please, President Trump, do something, right? So here we're seeing that. So we saw the articulation of why things have gotten to this point, and that's the failure of policies, the reclassification of crimes, activists, judges, feckless prosecutors alike. We know it, right? We talk about it all the time. So here we are seeing the president come in and do something, and then during this time, we'll set things right. But it's now up, I believe, to Congress and these cities to take this next step. Because the worst thing ever would be once this president leaves and then all the sand just goes back into the hole and it restores back to normal. So we need to set this precedent and then have it remain. So all these other blue cities that people have given up on have a fighting chance too.
Well, and the president said he's not going to give up. He said, we're not going to lose control. So all those cities had better wake up because he's serious about this. Look, I don't want to put our team in our control room too much in hot water here, but do you guys...
You can't ignore the role liberal policies play in this. No, I think that you definitely can't. And that's what I was saying before, is that a lot of like leftist thinking is that basically crime is a socioeconomic problem, and because it's a socioeconomic problem and socioeconomic problems disproportionately affect minorities in general, then dealing with crime is by abstraction racist. And so they don't deal with crime. They just let it go. It's toxic empathy. And also, again, these are always things that they're writing checks that someone else has to cash.
Like,
it's not happening to them.
The U.S. Attorney of D.C., Janine Pirro, talking about the kids, if you will. Because coming out of what Emily said, I think, all right, let's watch this.
I see too much violent crime being committed by young punks who think that they can get together in gangs.
It's about addressing wealth disparity. Just because, so what? Like, wealth disparity, that's got nothing to do with it. Like, if you're going around shooting people with a gun, I'm sorry, but like, it doesn't matter what your reason is. You've got to go to jail. What are you, retarded?
Cruise and beat the hell out of you or anyone else. They don't care where they are. They can be in DuPont Circle. But they know that we can't touch them.
Just
Why?
by ignoring it?
Because the laws are weak. I can't touch you if you're 14, 15, 16, 17 years old and you have a gun. I convict someone of shooting another person with an illegal gun on a public bus in the chest. Intent to kill? I convict him. And you know what the judge gives him? Probation. Says you should go to college. We need to go after the D.C. Council and their absurd laws. We need to get rid of this concept.
Please.
Well, look, this is brilliant, especially that show of force that we just saw during this press conference, this Liberation Day for Washington, D.C. Look, the Democrat Party has become the party of crime and disorder, and the Republican Party is the party of law and order. And what President Trump is doing in Washington, D.C. will underscore this point, because just like how he was able to we saw record highs of border crossings under Joe Biden and then record lows under President Trump in short order. That's what we're going to see in Washington, D.C. And we saw under the Obama administration where he appended the criminal justice system, where somehow it was racist to arrest criminals, which ended up putting minority communities even more at risk. And then what we saw under Joe Biden with
open... they get terrorized by these psychos.
Orders as well, just this lawlessness in the Democrat Party. So he's going to underscore this point and put these mayors in these blue cities on notice, because why won't they protect their citizens when they can? It's not an issue of being able to, it's an issue that they don't want to. And then also, I'll just go through, there's been a long list of members.
Somebody goes Republican law and order, just don't pay any attention to Trump or any of his friends. Why would you even bring that up? What does that have to do? Like, this is literally like it's people that are committing crimes and robbing people that are doing so. What a stupid thing to talk about. I understand that, like, you have some political, like, viewpoint, and so you have to constantly be oppositional to anything that Donald Trump does. But this is an objectively good thing to do. Like, this isn't, like, stop, like, you're thinking in such a weird dichotomy that's been created by, I don't know, like, weirdos on the internet. You don't have to live like that, man. You don't have to think like that.
The Congress, staffers, and the intern that was also murdered that had been attacked. You had Henry Cuellar was carjacked at gunpoint, member of Congress. Congresswoman Angie Craig attacked in her apartment complex. Senator Rand Paul had a staffer that was stabbed as well. And then, of course, those two Israeli embassy staffers that were executed recently in Washington, D.C. I also will finally just note that even in 2023, we saw a bipartisan effort with Joe Biden to override a rewrite of Washington, D.C.'s criminal code.
So you can see, everybody has a problem with this. This isn't a Donald Trump thing. This is common sense.
To do, softening on crime. So there has already been a demonstration of a bipartisan desire to get this under control.
No, he has a point. The party overwhelmingly elected a pedo protector at pardoned January 6ers cannot seriously call themselves the party of law and order. I don't like what calling themselves the party of law and order and all of this stuff. Like, you're so worried about the optics of something that you're just totally divorcing yourself from reality. I don't care about any of that. I mean, I do in a way, but like, not in this context. It's not relevant at all to the conversation. Does that mean that he shouldn't, like, so based off of your logic, now he shouldn't do anything against crime? What are you thinking? Like, this is a completely reactionary, brain-dead position that has no basis on anything other than, well, because he did this one thing, then it's bad that he's doing this. It's just stupid. It's brain rot. Like, what are you thinking about? Like, you should evaluate everything based off of what each individual thing is and if it's a positive or a negative thing. There are good things that bad people do, and there are bad things that good people do. If you can't understand that and come to terms with that, you need to go back to middle school. They should have never let you out. Like, this is it. It's really, I'll just, it's completely disingenuous. It is.
Control.
Yeah, and the president also, during his remarks, read the long list of victims of Washington, D.C. crime. And the person that I'm thinking about today is Nasratullah Amanyar, who worked as an Afghan interpreter, came to the United States and was murdered as a Lyft driver, working a shift as a Lyft driver in Washington, D.C., which means that he survived Taliban rule, working for the U.S. government, came to the United States for safety, and then was killed in our nation's capital.
Holy fuck.
And Harris, to your point...
It's embarrassing. It's pathetic. How embarrassing. Oh, my God.
The person who killed him was 14 years old at the time, and he received a 3-year sentence. And it was actually supposed to be a year and a half, and the judge said that that was too light. So what President Trump and Jeanine Pirro are trying to do is increase that, because a lot of these young people are being used for their youth.
They're being used by gangs. And this is an exploit that they're using, is that they have young people and siblings or kids that they pressure into doing this, commit crimes for them and do things for them in order to avoid taking on the potential risk themselves, because they know that if the kid gets arrested, nothing's going to happen to them.
You know, I got to be honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. I am genuinely surprised and shocked just how much Dragon Age the Veilguard truly ruined these people over at BioWare. I'm talking about emotionally destroyed, mentally ruined, all kinds of ruination that's happening here, all because this game was completely rejected by gamers, right? They just don't like to admit the fact that what they did with Dragon Age the Veilguard was wholly rejected, and they're trying to look at everybody that they possibly can and point the finger and blame them, right? The biggest scapegoat right now for Dragon Age the Veilguard is none other than EA themselves. The developers over at BioWare have been pointing the finger at EA and saying, well, it's their fault as the reason why the game flopped. It's their fault as the reason why the game is the way it is. But the hilarious thing is that there's developers inside of BioWare that say, no, we made the game that we wanted to make. We made the exact game that we wanted to make. Woke and all, we wanted to make it. That's what we wanted to do. So you have an internal battle that's happening here. And Mark Dara, who is not even like, I know he consulted on Veilguard, but he didn't even like work on Veilguard in the standard sense. He consulted on Veilguard, and he's been constantly, since the game's failure, trying to make everything else the blame, right? EA, whoever, they're trying to make everything else the blame. Well, now he is telling the Mass Effect developers to utilize Dragon Age de Veilguard as a scapegoat to defend itself against EA. This guy has a massive hard-on against Electronic Arts. So let's talk about it. So he's a BioWare veteran who shares his advice for the developers working on Mass Effect 5 as the studio goes all in on its sci-fi series. But this advice relates to BioWare's fraught relationship with EA, something Dara had to navigate for years. Surprisingly, his advice is to scapegoat Dragon Age de Veilguard. Dara, who is a consultant on the Veilguard, says that the Mass Effect team could use the game's failure, at least in the eyes of EA, to get the resources and freedom it needs for its own game. Now, one thing he made a claim to was that BioWare, unfortunately, you know, there was always like favoritism being played there, according to Dara, right? So they always claimed that EA favored Mass Effect over Dragon Age because EA apparently had trouble understanding how to make Dragon Age a mainstream success. And in my opinion, I think it goes both hand in hand. I think BioWare also had trouble trying to make Dragon Age a mainstream success after their massive success of Dragon Age Origins, right? Even Inquisition, one of their highest selling games, if not their highest selling game, people had issues with. And then you have Dragon Age Veilguard, which is not even on anybody's radar. If you guys forgot just how bad Dragon Age Veilguard actually did, remember, they score on players engaged. They don't score on copies sold. And even with players engaged, Dragon Age Veilguard missed the EA expectations by 50% plus. So the game did half of what it was projected to do, and to be honest with you, it was probably more than that. But he says he urges the developers to do this even if the scapegoating isn't quite accurate, since it could help EA actually listen to the developers. Now, this comes from Mark Dara's interview with YouTuber Mr. Matty Plays. Here, Dara reflects on the current state of BioWare and shares his optimism about Mass Effect 5's development, even after Dragon Age Veilguard's fate. You know what's hilarious? These journalists refuse to say that Dragon Age Veilguard was a failure. They don't want to use the term that the game was a failure, right? They'll even try to convince you that the game was a win and that everybody else is just wrong about it being a failure. That's what they tried to do. It's actually kind of hilarious. I do think this is less messy, says Dara, referring to Mass Effect 5 at around the 1320 mark. To be frank, the Mass Effect team is going to be able to point to the Veilguard and say we should steer away from some of these things because look what happened. And we all know what these things are. We all know what Mass Effect may most likely be steering away from, which is identity politics. If they were smart, they would stay clear away from that. Nobody's saying you can't have gay relationships because that was always in Mass Effect for the most part. But if you're talking about pronouns, if you're talking about transgender ideology, if you're talking about everything that will literally take you out of the experience, then that's going to be a big problem, just like it was in Dragon Age Veilguard. You may want to say, oh, that's not the reason why the game failed. Sure, you can cope, but at the end of the day, it was definitely part of it, and adding to it on already a slippery slope is not exactly a great idea. As much as that stings, especially for the developers who worked hard to turn the Veilguard into something that can be shipped after EA kept supposedly interfering with its development, Dara says the team should do it anyway. I would honestly encourage the team to scapegoat Veilguard as much as they need to get what they need from the organization, whether it's true or not. So he's flat out saying they should lie to EA to get what they want. It's insane. Of course, this isn't Dara himself scapegoating the Veilguard. Not only did he consult on the game, but he also bigged it up prior to launch and defended the developers from the supposed abuse they received. And again, these are the developers that would go out there and attack people quite often. They would make certain statements quite often. Their game is a literal attack on just anything that's even remotely normal. They try to consider it to be one of these things where they're like, oh, we're just telling our story. We're telling our identity story. It's like, bro, Nobody wants to see that shit. Just like nobody wants to hear a straight person talk about how much straight things they do all the time. Nobody wants to hear that, bro. We're playing Dragon Age right now. Like, we're trying to play in a fantasy world, and I'm running around, and I'm seeing people with trans scars from real life. Like, what the fuck are we doing, bro? This makes no sense. But in any case, however, given that Dara and others from BioWare have repeatedly said that EA is difficult to work with and struggles to grasp what makes gamers want from RPGs, this might be the only way to get the higher-ups to understand. As Dara himself says elsewhere in the same interview, keep in mind, again, like I said earlier in the video, the BioWare developers have openly said that they made the game they wanted to make. All right, not this whole like scapegoating with EA. EA's the problem. EA's the fault. Whatever. No, they said they made the game they wanted to make. So if Dragon Age: The Veilguard is the game they wanted to make with the story and identity politics and everything under the sun, then it's pretty clear that this is what they wanted to do from the start, or at least somewhat what they wanted to do from the start. You can talk about EA being difficult to work with all you want. You could blame them for the reason why they, the game failed, but they flat out said they made the game they wanted to make. But unfortunately, the Dragon Age team was not granted that luxury, supposedly, until it was too late to course correct. The Veilguard had to be made from the bones of a scrap multiplayer Dragon Age game that pretty much nobody wanted. And it's hilarious because nobody wanted a live service Dragon Age game, so you ended up making a identity politics driven nonsensical Dragon Age game that nobody also wanted as well. So you replaced one Dragon Age game that nobody wanted with another one that nobody wanted. Great job to the BioWare team that worked on that game. But in any case, Dara also said that EA wouldn't greenlight remasters or remakes of the first 3 Dragon Age games, so it doesn't seem that the publisher ever had much faith in the fantasy series. I don't think that's true at all. I think Dragon Age Origins was pretty much proof that the game could definitely, the franchise as a whole could definitely be a massive hit. If you guys don't have any faith in RPGs like Dragon Age Origins, I will just point the finger to Baldur's Gate 3. It's pretty clear that as long as you give the gamers what they want and you make it good and you do the right thing, you will be rewarded with their money. You may not be as successful as Baldur's Gate 3, but once the word gets out there about your game and how things have changed and how you're doing the right thing, it's only a matter of time before you start making money. Even if you don't come out the gate swinging necessarily, you will make up your money, even through a multitude of different sales or whatever. You'll make it back up. I think they are just using for any excuse. They're looking for any excuse, I should say, that to blame Dragon Age, instead of just blaming themselves. These developers that were behind Dragon Age, they chose to do what they wanted to do. And EA, sure, they might have been difficult to work with, but at the end of the day, you've worked with them before. Surely you could work with them now. I think what it is a lot of mismanagement, a lot of waste of funds. I think a lot of just excuses that are being thrown around, not only by leadership, but also developers in general. There's a lot of excuses when it comes to Dragon Age: The Veilguard, but all the excuses in the world doesn't excuse that you motherfuckers made Taj, okay? Like, Taj is one of the worst written characters that I think I have ever seen in gaming in at least the last 5 years, maybe even longer than that. I'm not kidding. So anyway, you guys let me know in the comments down below. What do you think about this? What do you think about Dragon Age: The Veilguard being used as a scapegoat for Mass Effect? What do you think about Mass Effect 5's future development? Whatever it may be, leave it in the comments down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting that like and subscribe button as we are on the road to 98K. And I will see you guys on the next one.
All right, I hear you. You want me to talk about this. So here we are. We're doing it. We're going to talk about it. We're going to address it head on. Now, there's a select group of people that will consistently comment under every single one of my videos, warning about how bad private internet access is and how they're connected to intelligence and how there used to be scammers and all of this. And I've seen this comment so many times now. The first like 3 or 4 I did reply to. I got a bit sick and tired of copying and pasting the same responses. So in this video, I actually want to go through some of the misconceptions, not just around VPNs, but more specifically private internet access. Now, this video is not sponsored by private internet access. I do have an affiliate link, but that's not for this video, it's for my whole channel. And as always, it is down below. To be clear, the commission I'm getting from private internet access is significantly lower than the commission I was offered by NordVPN. I haven't chosen private internet access for money. In fact, I'm more than happy to show you the emails of me turning down NordVPN. So what am I talking about? Well, all over the internet, especially in the past year, and that will become very apparent shortly, there's been a lot of negative sentiment around private internet access, and it tends to come from a very particular group of people. And we're going to talk a little bit about it because I feel I have at least a social responsibility to defend my stance in promoting private internet access. If I'm going to promote it to you, I've got to do it with chest, and I've got to come at you with some facts. So the first thing that comes up a lot is that private internet access is owned by Cape Technologies. And Cape Technologies used to be called Crossrider. That, so far, is correct. But one of the biggest claims that has been made is that Crossrider used to be a malware company and they were making software to infect people's PCs. Well, sounds like a pretty cool story. And that's all it is. Crossrider basically made an APK, and what it did is it allowed ads to run on gaming apps or shopping apps. Basically, if you created an iOS or Android app, you could use Crossrider as a way to get your adverts to appear on the bottom. It's essentially an ad network. Google does the exact same thing with the Google Ad Network, and essentially if you own an app, or say if you've created your own game, you can implement that sort of software that Crossrider was making to actually have ads come up. Now, there were people that were exploiting this APK, and they were actually using it as a way to get malware to appear on people's devices, computers, phones, whatever. Now, Crossrider actually tried to tackle this in numerous ways, and by the way, there are links down below for all the individual points if you want to learn a bit more about what actually happened. But essentially, they decided to actually pull the software completely, and then people started spoofing it, creating clones of it, and this whole thing started growing that Crossrider was a malware company. No, they were not. I just want to very quickly touch on something that's really important. So back in the day, one of the big articles that blew up around Crossrider and malware and all of this was actually an article written by Cyber Insider. Now, Cyber Insider is a relatively trustworthy outlet that has been at the forefront of exposing many companies over the years. Now, obviously that article blew up and other companies like MPN caught wind of this, and other VPNs, of course, latched onto this and started even running ads against these articles so their VPNs would appear on these pages. Now, off the basis of this, we're now seeing present-day media reporting on old articles from MPN and even old articles from Cyber Insider. And it even got to the point where Cyber Insider have actually gone back to their original article and completely changed it. I quote, "Based on the information and other sources, we previously assumed that Crossrider was the creator of this malware. However, it's important to get the details exactly right, so let's dig deeper." And you can pause this on the screen right now to have a look. But essentially, they confirmed that Crossrider didn't make any malware at all, and people were just abusing the software as a way to actually plug in malware to people's devices and create configuration profiles on Macs and even admin profiles on Windows to then launch attacks on PCs. But Crossrider were nothing to do with these attacks taking place. The article also goes into detail with a Crossrider employee issuing statements about how they tried to mitigate these risks and how they tried to tackle it. Then, of course, it goes on to explain how the platform was shut down because trying to mitigate this risk just became the core focus of the company, and it got to the point where it just wasn't worthwhile doing anymore. Now, it's very interesting that if you look at some of the original articles, they directly reference the Cyber Insider report on this, so they're referencing redacted, incorrect information, and that is the basis for all of these videos we're seeing on YouTube about private internet access. By the way, all of the articles that we've referenced against private internet access all have one thing in common, and we will talk about that later in the video. Now, the next thing that comes up is that they've worked with various different security agencies and with people that have been previously involved with internet crime groups. And that's true, but context is very important. They're creating security software. They need to bring people in to stress test that software. They need to get people in that will tell them how they would break it. These are white hat hackers. This is something that's been well known for many years across many industries, including our governments that hire hundreds, if not thousands of them a year. Because when you're creating a security software, yes, you have to bring in the bad guys to actually stress test that software, because the best people to actually test it are the people that know how to crack it and know what the exploits are. So to make the systems more secure and to make private internet access safer, they bring in people to stress test it to make sure that none of these exploits can be used. This is very common and it happens across nearly every single VPN company. Next, we have the articles on MPN, Mint Press News. Now, this is a really tricky one to talk about because no matter how you phrase it, I look bad no matter what I say. I don't want to get into the geopolitics of Israel, Palestine, and all that stuff going on. However, Palestinian-based tech companies tend to have an emphasis and tend to have a bias against Israeli tech companies. Maybe understandably so. There's a war going on. It makes sense. But in the case of Mint Press News, which by the way, at the moment is the biggest driving force against private internet access, they're a company with a Palestinian CEO where nearly every single article on that website is bashing Israeli companies or bashing Israel. In fact, if you go through all of the articles that have been referenced by other YouTubers, in total I found 6. All 6 of them are written by pro-Palestinian people. Now, I'm not saying that because they're Palestinian that they have a bias. I'm saying that we can look on their social media and see that they're very actively against Israel. Like I said before, it doesn't matter what your politics are either way on this. When criticizing a company or trying to be a critic of a company for their security practices, you shouldn't allow your biases to dictate the facts. Also as well, using Ground News's factuality checker, where they basically check news against other outlets and other articles, it would appear that every single news article that comes out, MPN's coverage of it tends to rank at some of the lowest factuality scores out of all of them. I'm not saying that there isn't any merit to maybe some of the accusations that are being made, but you need to understand the context and the bias. Already in their report on private internet access, there were numerous things that they did indeed get wrong. For example, peddling the narrative that Crossrider made malware. They didn't. They made software that was abused and turned into malware by nefarious people, of which Crossrider acted accordingly and then pulled the software. I'm not interested in getting into the geopolitics of other countries where I don't live and I don't necessarily understand what's happening in those countries, and I am a YouTuber. I'm not qualified to talk about those particular topics. But what I am qualified to say is that I understand bias when I see it. You can clearly see a lot of the websites that call out private internet access have a history of just calling out Israeli companies. There's a bias there, so immediately everything comes with a pinch of salt. And by the way, for the record, maybe I have a bias because I have an affiliate link. You can do what you will with that, but I know that I'm keeping my integrity intact by promoting private internet access. Like I said, I can get a bigger paycheck from promoting another VPN, but I don't. The next thing is the claim that they submit information to governments on a regular basis. I've seen a few channels and a few articles claim this now. While private internet access have a public report, an annual report that they issue every year, and it's on their website. You can go and see it, you can check it, and they say exactly what data has been submitted and what data has been requested, and out of how many requests did they actually submit data to. They also give some more information about how various bits of information was protected, blah, blah, blah. You can read into all of that on there, but it's there. I have not yet seen a single article, YouTube channel, or anything criticizing private internet access and also mentioning this transparency report. It's a transparency report that many VPN providers don't have. The next thing is security. So I see this a lot, but other YouTubers that are promoting other VPNs will then basically go on to attack another VPN. And I'm not doing this from a position of attacking other VPNs. I'm doing this from a position of defending the VPN that I support and I use. There's people saying that other VPNs like Mulvad, for example, are more secure. Mulvad have had 3 in the past 3 years, where people's account information and log data, which supposedly wasn't tracked, was found on the dark web. Now, I'm not saying that Mulvad VPN isn't secure, but choosing a company like Private Internet Access, which pretty much has an impeccable record for security, and pitting that against a company that doesn't make sense to me. Now, in a recent video made by another creator where they basically went after other creators for promoting private internet access, one of the core things that was brought up was that private internet access have some websites where they write reviews, and some of the reviews are about private internet access. Essentially, they're rating their own VPN as highly ranked. Now, whilst it's true that Cape own other websites, a lot of the writers for these websites are independent, but also for a number of different categories, this website has ranked other VPNs as being better for certain activities. The thing that I found really funny about all of this is the source for all of this information was a report done by Windscribe about other VPNs. Windscribe isn't just a news outlet, they have their own VPN. So quoting a website that has its own website which writes reviews about its own VPN, calling out another company for having a website that writes reviews about its own VPN is such a nonsensical argument. Now, I did mention this down in the comment sections, but magically my comment disappeared. Now, I have mentioned this in comments before, and people say that I can't use this in my arguments for private internet access because it's another YouTuber and we're all the same and all of this stuff. Linus Tech Tips obviously promoted private internet access for years. Then for a period, he started asking questions to private internet access when stuff started coming out online. He then did a video of private internet access where he answered all of his questions, and now he's continually working with them. And this is the last thing I want to talk about, and this is probably the bit of the video where I'm going to get a bit passionate with you all, but I think it's important. There are many creators out there that just shill a product. They'll just shill anything. They'll take any brand deal. Now, across my main channel, and to be honest, thanks to you guys for subscribing, but over the past 2 weeks on this channel, I've been receiving the best part of maybe 100 brand deal offers a week. That's a significant amount. considering this is like a new channel, I get a lot of offers for brand deals, and I say no to nearly every single one of them because I'm human and I don't have the time by myself to vet them all. I do have a management company and they're sick. They help me with everything. But before I go on camera, even though I'm wearing a mask, before I go on camera and before I shill a product, I at least like the ability to sleep at night. I think that's pretty important. So I make sure I do all of my due diligence. Now, private internet access just didn't come out of the blue. I've had I think I was at 3,000 subscribers on my main channel when I first started working with them. And the first thing I did was ask them a load of questions, because that was around the time when Linus Tech Tips was like talking to them and did all the interview and stuff. And I started asking them questions. Now I have a direct contact at Private Internet Access and I ask regular questions. I don't like getting into the narrative driven stuff, and there may be concerns with private internet access, but I'm telling you for a fact it's going to be impossible to know whether they're legitimate concerns because of this whole Israel company bad rhetoric that's spreading all over social media. It's impossible to actually see through those biases. Things like Ground News, for example, I know they're not sponsoring this video, by the way, but that does help because you can actually break apart those biases and understand a little bit the narrative from those outlets. But even then, I know information comes out all the time that's demonstrably false about not just private internet access, but many companies, whether they're even like Palestinian companies. I won't read any news about like Palestinian companies written by an Israeli outlet just because there's going to be a bias there, or at least I think it's safe to assume that there will be some bias there. And it's the same case with private internet access. I get so many comments and emails that, like, I've had some vile emails from people where they've just read like an NPN article, or they've seen a YouTube video which is full of inaccuracies for one, or that video quotes something like NPN or another news article that has a bias, and that's their basis for basically going on a campaign against everyone that promotes them. Now, to be clear, I am making the problem worse by making this video. I am 100% making this issue worse because it's like when you talk about it, you speak it into existence. Like I'm bringing awareness to the fact that there is bollocks on the internet about them. But I also think I have a social, moral, and ethical responsibility to make this video to not just defend myself, because I'm not going to be accused of being a shill and not doing my due diligence when it comes to the brands I work with. But also, I hate the fact that it's now seen that VPN is bad and this VPN company is bad because news article said so. It's not black and white, and we're basically now dealing with stuff that happened in 2018, false articles that were written. People believe that. People write their own articles based on the findings of someone else. And if you go all the way back and actually find out what really happened, for example, with Crossrider going into Cape, you realize actually Crossrider didn't do anything wrong. Maybe they didn't handle the situation perfectly, but they weren't injecting malware into people's computers or phones. And this is where we start to see negativity spread on the internet and bullshit spread on the internet. I think the internet's the only place where bullshit talks and the truth walks. But yeah, anyway, I thought I'd make this video to clarify. I didn't want to get into the technical side of VPNs and how they work. I've already covered that on the channel. This was more the ability for me to put my ethics out there and let you guys do as you will with it. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.
Today we're going to be doing a deep dive into the world of creating your own custom-made Blu-rays and DVDs. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, if you're a physical media collector, you can't argue with that tangible feeling of owning the media that you care about. And I have shared my thoughts and opinions many times on the channel when it comes to collecting DVDs and Blu-rays, especially in the age of streaming. Arguably, there is still a marketplace for physical media, but some studios do disagree, just outright refusing to release certain TV shows and movies, or they just simply don't care to release their stuff onto a physical format that you can own. Remember that ownership is power, where you're the one in control. If you own the content that you consume, it cannot be altered by censorship or taken away from you. Detailing how to approach creating your own customized Blu-rays and DVDs, I'll split this video up into sections where we shall be talking about product recommendations such as authoring software and certain pieces of equipment that you will require, along with providing just a general loose kind of tutorial. By all means, feel free to hop around at the time codes I've placed in the description, but I would recommend being patient and just bearing with me. As always, it is very much appreciated.
Everyone right now is talking about the cost of living, but there's another side to that coin, which is how much you earn, and are you earning enough in 2025? The first thing we should really discuss is what do they mean by average and how it can be misleading. The number you'll hear very often cited as the average is the mean. That is just all the data in the data set divided by the number of people in that set. Now, on the face of it, this can seem to be relatively sensible, but it has one key drawback. But let me explain with an example. Let's say you have 50 people sitting in a pub in the UK, and on average they earn £30,000, calculated using the mean. And then this woman walks in. This is Denise Coates. She is routinely the most highly paid CEO in the UK. She runs Bet365, and last year was paid £221 million. She is our 51st person to walk into the pub. What is the average salary of everyone in the pub now? £4.4 million. And I think this really serves to outline why the mean has some fundamental flaws, and that's because it has this sensitivity to outliers, that the addition of a single person into our admittedly small sample size can make a massive difference to the overall average. So how do we get around this problem? Well, that gives us the median. And for the most part, this is going to be the variable that we'll use for the rest of the video because it's way more representative and isn't prone to these large swings. So how do we calculate the median? The median takes all the data in the dataset ordered lowest to highest, and the median is the number exactly in the middle, 50% beneath it, 50% above it. So you can straight away see how the median is a much more accurate measure. So that's the first real takeaway from the video is when someone tells you the average, you really need to understand what kind of average are they talking about. And there was also this point, which I think summarizes it quite nicely in this Forbes article. This data is a blunt instrument of overall earnings. Wages vary wildly depending on a range of factors such as your age, where you live in the country, and whether you're in the public or private sector and the industry you work in. So with the next part of the video, what is the average salary in the UK? So in 2025, the mean salary in the UK was £35,830, and the mean salary for all full-time workers was £42,110. So what we can obviously see here is the difference between everyone who's working, and then the second number we have just those people who work full-time. I think this also highlights another really important point we should look at when it comes to wage data, which is you've got not just the difference between the mean and the median, but you've also got with earnings, without earnings, with overtime, without overtime, weekly wages, average annual wages. So there are so many ways to measure what can just be such a simple statistic or a very simple outcome. But we've talked about how the mean isn't great. So what does the median look like for the UK? So the median annual salary for workers in the UK for 2025 is £34,963. That increases to £37,856 for full-time workers. And so we can already see that the mean is slightly higher. If we think back to our old pal Denise in the pub, that's exactly the reason why. So for the time being, we'll carry on using the median because it's better. But for me personally, I don't even really think this is the most interesting part. For me, the most interesting part is when you dive into this data and you start to look at the income percentiles. This can really help to tell you where your salary fits into a much broader national picture. So in the UK in 2025, you're in the bottom 10% of the country if you earn less than £9,660 a year. To be in the 30th percentile or the bottom 30, you need to make less than £22,763. If you're the median or slap bang in the middle, as we've just mentioned, the average salary is £34,963. And I think this is really where things start to get interesting. If I was to ask you how much do you need to earn to be in the top 10%, what might you say? Well, according to this ONS data, to be in the top 10% in the UK, you need to earn £72,115. And what would you say for the top 5%? To be in the top 5% of earners, you need to make £87,012 per year. And this is the really interesting one. How much do you think you would have to make in order to be in the top 1% of earners in the country? So according to this ONS data, to be in the top 1%, you need to be making a total of £173,952 a year. Next, we're going to look at age. As we've mentioned, looking at the average, even if we look at the median compared to the mean, does have its limitations. Because no matter whether you're using the mean or the median, there are other important variables at play, Another one straight off the bat is your age. If you're comparing the salaries of someone who's fresh out of university to someone who's been in the workforce for 50 years, then obviously they're going to have different salaries, and that age is going to play an important factor. So let's look at the median salary in the UK broken down by age. So for 18 to 21, it's around £17,284. For 22 to 29, it's £24,600. For 30 to 39, it's £30,865. For 40 to 49, it's £33,477. For 50 to 59, it's £31,358. And for 60 plus, it's £27,508. But again, there's another really interesting aspect to this data that I want to add, which is this column just here. So if you include the high earner salary for each of these age brackets, that's someone who makes 10% or more for that age bracket, I think it also highlights a really interesting point. People might have accumulated assets and so therefore don't need the money as much. You'll also have people who have given up work entirely and they rely either on the state pension or they rely on their private pension as well. Some people will just have fewer outgoings, and so, again, they don't need the money as much. But as we've talked about, your age isn't the only factor. It also